Let's get started. Okay, well, let's start out. Who are the pollinators? They are, as you can see from this picture, a number of different insects, bats, birds that all help in the diversity in with what we're doing with the pollinator pathway. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Oh boy.
Thank you.
I lost it. I turned the phone off because I was getting double.
Oh, no, you're on, Lou. We can hear you.
Okay. Let me continue on. I'm hoping you could hear me, folks, because I can't hear anybody talking to me.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
So why are the pollinators important? Well, first of all, they support the biodiversity that supports the entire food chain all the way up to us. And we do require that these pollinators pollinate about 75 to 95% of the plants in order for them to reproduce. There are a number of species of pollinators out there, and they pollinate a number of different crops. So it's quite important. There are over 4,000 species of bees, and of those, and the many, many types of bees are doing the pollinating. The most ones that are popular are honeybees. And they are popular for a couple of reasons. One, they are a $20 billion industry where farmers will rent beehives, pollinate their orchards or their crops because there's just a lack of natural honeybees out there. Honeybees also produce wax and honey, which has some commercial value as well. Why are they declining? Well, there are a number of reasons. Climate change is the obvious one, but there are other things. Habitat loss, the use of extensive use of pesticides, parasites, diseases, and other things, such as invasive species that are encroaching on our woods and our fields. So let's talk about each one. Habitat loss. The chief causes of pollinator habitat loss are agricultural use, urbanization, which is land fragmentation, and of course the climate. Fragmented habitat is often too small. In other words, pollinators need a certain amount of habitat and food source to support their population. And fragmentation cuts up the properties into small pieces. Many of them turn into residential lawns, in which case there are no more places for these insects to thrive. So if we look at this little picture here, you can see an idea of what fragmentation looks like. What used to be open fields and farms are now housing developments, smaller pieces of property, private ownership, so every little piece of property is handled differently. And of course we have what's known as a lawn culture, which means that we have beautiful front lawns that look great. Not great for the pollinators, but they do look great for the curb appeal. So if you're a bug or a bird that's flying south for the winter and you need to stop by and have a place to eat and sleep, which property are you going to pick? Obviously the one in the middle, because that's the one that has the most habitat that you would be needing. Pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, all the Ides of March, which was a couple of days ago, all these things can affect the pollinators directly, some of them indirectly. Insecticides applied to plant seeds will contaminate the pollen of that seed. It'll also be washed down into the soil, killing everything down in the soil, including the worms and everything else down in there that we all need for this. Pesticides are probably one of the most important things. Now, I'll be getting to this a little bit more in a minute. Going back to that lawn culture, that looks great, but there's really nothing there that the pollinators need. So for them, it may as well be a desert. And of course, talking about front lawns or yards, there are a lot of land. 40 million acres of land has acres on it. That's 3 times more than we use for growing corn. And all that stuff is getting washed into our water systems, whether you have a well, whether you're near a little creek, whether it's just going down and washing out down the curb, going down the storm sewer drain and out to the rivers and the creeks and back to our water supply. So all this stuff, once it's in the environment, it doesn't go away. And of course, we know what happens if you have overexposure to this. So this is one of the main reasons why we want to, not only for the pollinators, but also for us humans too, to get some of the poison out of our systems. Not to pick on Scott's, there are many other manufacturers out there, but this is a complete list of everything that would be involved. Now, this is industrial agriculture is significantly affecting the pollinators. There's something called neonics or nicotinoid pesticide, which is probably put on just about every ear of corn that's being grown in the United States today and many other parts of the world. And this is to get rid of the weed. These are all genetically modified plants. So this won't kill the plant, but it will kill all the weeds around the plant so that the farmer doesn't have to worry about weeds. It also gets down into the soil, and there it does its job on earthworms and the microbacteria that are in the soil that are needed. So it eventually not only kills the plant, it saves the corn plant, but it kills the soil under it. And it does a number on any bees or other pollinating insects that are thriving on it. Glyphosate is the #1 character here. Roundup is the common commercial name for it. And we've lost over 100 million acres over the last 10 years because of this. This is, whoops, sorry. I think I just jumped ahead a little bit. So this is really significant when it comes to agriculture. Parasites, diseases, the honeybees are suffering from the Verona mite. There are other types of diseases that are affecting the pollinators as well. I'm sure you've all heard of colony collapse, which is really a reoccurring condition for no known reason. It's not really due to the climate change or the pesticides at this point. It's just something that happens occasionally. We don't know why. Invasive species. I'm sure that if you drove down the highway and you looked over to the side in the summertime, at least when the foliage is out, you would notice that you don't see trees anymore. All you see is vines covering the trees. And these are some of the types of invasive plants that are taking over. And when we look at these plants, we find that they not only cover those trees, but they're also growing in the fields, and they're taking over wildflowers and native plants. It does not allow the sunlight to get down to the seedlings, so these new native plants can't even grow. And even though some of these invasive plants do flower, their flowers do not contain the necessary nutrients that our native bugs actually need. So they're getting malnourished by feeding on these invasive plants. Here are some samples of them. Japanese knotweed is you usually find them growing along a creek or a river, or if you have any wetlands in your property, you'll find that growing in there. Barberry, any trail you walk on has barberry, and the ticks absolutely love living in barberry. So trying to get them away from the trails that we have on our properties, and so that you can walk down the trail without getting ticks all over you, is one of the jobs we try to do is in the land trust. And the only way to get rid of barberry is to pull it out by the roots. And then when you do, you got to go burn it or do something with it, because if you just throw it to the side, it's going to regrow. You got mugwort, you've got mile a minute vine, you got all these things that are now creeping in and taking over our natural vegetation, and it's really not healthy for our environment. And of course we have climate change. And flowering plants are moving farther and farther north or at higher elevations because they need to be within a certain temperature range. The pollinators that have to feed off them and pollinate them have to go with them, so they're changing their habitat territory as well. And then, of course, we're having severe weather events that are creating sincere havoc across the United States and around the world. But heat waves and floods and wildfires and droughts, etc., are killing our pollinating land, and it's affecting everything human and everything alive, actually, not just us. So that brings me to the pollinator pathway. And the pollinator pathway is just really a mechanism that we can talk about to help create a pesticide-free corridor of property that will provide the type of nutrition and the type of habitat that pollinators need. And we didn't just pull the concept out of the air. If you look on this slide, you'll see that there are a number of green and gold areas, which are the ones with the highest conservation value, and the green is the protected space that we have already. So if you drew a generally wide swath across those things, you would get what looks like a map to your right. Now, that doesn't mean that people who aren't in that gray swath shouldn't be involved in the pollinator pathway. We want everybody to do a little bit, at least, to help the pollinators. But this swath is what we term the pollinator pathway. And if we can make as much of this contiguous as possible, we've got a great shot of turning Brookfield into a true pathway. We're being supported. This is a regional effort. This is not just a one-off that we came up with here in Brookfield. There are a number of towns involved. There is an organization called the H2H, Hudson to Housatonic, that's sort of our, it's a regional area thing. So it's looking at an entire region, not just a small town or a small area. And they've been very supportive of us and very supportive of the pollinator pathway. In fact, and you should write down this email address or this website, www.pollinator-pathway.org. There is a wealth of information here. It's all free and downloadable. Just go to it and read up on stuff. There's all kinds of information there for you. It's very important, and they have been very staunch supporters of this, and they are actually really helping towns get organized and move forward with this whole project. Another organization that's local, they're actually located in Bethel, is Protect Our Pollinators. They're far more interested in honeybees or regular bees, but they also have a lot of information. They've been very active in organizing the pollinator pathway in the various towns. So if you go to propollinators.org, you'll also find a lot of good information and a lot of great downloads that you can do. So as I was saying, a number of towns. When I started this a couple of years ago, there were maybe 30 towns. We're over 200 now, and there are just quite a few, and it's growing, and it's growing. So this is just not something that's local. It's now becoming nationwide. We have pollinator pathways on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and starting up all over the place. So we're not alone. So what is the pollinator pathway? All right, well, let's take a look at this. We have 3 areas of open space. Let's say they're a mile or 2 or 3 apart. Let's say the one on the left is Happy Landings, and the one in the center is the Gursky property or the high school. And then the last one over there could be Birch Rocks or one of the other things, or Burr Farm area. And we notice that there's a lot of space between them. And bees really only have a range of about half a mile. So they can only go out about a half and then have to come back. Otherwise, they're gone too far. So what we try to do then is to take a look at the space between here. And we ask homeowners if they would just plant some pollinator gardens or do something on their property to help the pollinators a little bit. And before you know it, we would have a pathway where the pollinators can essentially go from one open space to the next and be able to feed and nourish and protect themselves along the way. So that's really what the pollinator pathway is striving to do, whether it's public land, municipal land, private land, farms, whatever. So what can we do? Well, take the pledge. In other words, you can join on to the pollinator pathway movement, and it's very simple to do. There is a number of handouts and information available that you can print out. Here is one of them. It actually shows you what plants come into bloom at what time of the year and what they look like. And these are all native pollinating plants that you can go to Shakespeares Garden and ask to see. If they don't have these plants, they will certainly have alternatives. And they will also be able to give you all kinds of advice on how to plant, when to plant, what to plant, et cetera, et cetera. So please take advantage of that. It's there for you, and we're working closely with Shakespeares Garden on this whole thing. In fact, I think we're going to be having some tours coming up very soon. Rethink your yards. Here's the first thing you could do at your own home or your own property. As much as you can, limit your use of synthetic pesticides and et cetera. Try to use organic or natural products if you can. Yes, you usually have to apply them a little bit more frequently than you do the chemical stuff, but it's a lot safer. In fact, I used to, I hate to admit this, I used to use something like Roundup around the pool area where I have old gravels to kill the weeds. And then I decided to switch over and I went to a vinegar solution. You know what? It works just as well. So I don't need to go back to the chemicals again. And hopefully nobody else does either. When you mow your lawn, don't cut it real short. Don't scalp it. First of all, it'll burn the lawn come summertime. But secondly, if you leave it about 3 inches or so long, it leave the thatch, leave the clippings in there. It'll give some place for the pollinators to live and breathe, the bug kind, and the little insects. When it comes to the fall and you're raking your leaves, leave some leaves in your flower beds because there will be things left in there that need to overwinter and hatch in the spring. Same thing with your perennials. Rather than cutting down your perennials in the fall, let them sit there until spring and then chop them down before you, like this time of year, go out there and do them now. Now, when you have a pathway, some people live in condos and in apartments, other people have a large piece of property. Well, you can do it anywhere. It's scalable. So if you have a small space, a simple window box with a few pollinating plants is really all we're looking for. Any pots of outdoor plants, small garden be cool. If you got larger spaces and you want to put in a flowering garden, if you want to add shrubs or trees to your landscape that are pollinating, flowering, that would be very helpful as well. But it's all scalable, whether you do it on a small scale or you go all the way up to restoring an entire property. It can be done. It's just knowing that as you go up that scale, the complexity, the planning, and the cost all increase, so obviously. The third thing we need you to do is spread the word. If you are going to be serious about this, then register your property on the pollinatorpathway.org website. That'll put your property on the map. Nobody's going to contact you or try to sell you anything. It's just you're out there showing that you support and you're part of the population that is supporting this effort. If you want to put a Pollinator Pathway medallion on your front yard, I have one on my tree at the front, just to let the neighbors know that we are pesticide free and that we support this thing. So the last thing you can do is come visit us on our Facebook page. We don't have a website, but we do have a Facebook page, Pollinator Pathway, Brookfield Pollinator Pathway. And there, when you get there, read up what's on there. I try to post as many interesting articles as I come across, but I suggest that you do as well. If you want to ask a question, just get involved. Use this as a forum for communicating. And so, in short, it really takes a village. It takes the municipal leaders, and I can say that our selectmen are in favor and support the Pollinator Pathway here in Brookfield. We look to property owners and HOAs. We look to small businesses and large businesses. And of course, like the civic groups, like the Garden Club is a staunch supporter of us, as is the Lions Club. And we're working very closely with the town's parks and recs and with the Conservation Commission. I've been working with the Brookfield High School, getting students involved. The one thing we haven't been able to attack yet is the public utilities, where the the pipelines and the overhead high tension wires, all that land under there could be filled with pollinating plants. There's no reason why it can't be, other than the fact that we need to get somebody to do it. So that is it. That is my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions, but unfortunately, I can't hear anyone. So I'm going to have to try to figure out a way of doing that, or Rachel will just have to send me the
Can you hear me,
questions,
Lou?
and I'll try to answer them if you've just put your email address or something on there.
They can use the chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't hear me,
Or
Lou?
you can use the chat box.
So we did have a question. Let's see.
That's me.
Can you hear me? No.
All right. So can anybody hear me? Somebody raise your hand. Okay, good. I'm glad you can hear me. I can't hear anybody else. That's the problem. Rachel?
Yes,
I guess that's it for me. I don't know how many questions we have, but if you want to shoot them over to me, I'll try to get answers out to everybody.
I did add one to the.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you talk to him on the phone?
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Mm.
Oh, hi, Rachel.
Hi. So I'm going to relay a question to you. And that is, we have several questions actually. So let me just read them out to you.
Okay.
And one was, what's the size? So they said they felt it was answered, but I wanted to ask it for everyone else, which is, what is the size of the garden that's necessary to be findable by the pollinators?
They'll find anything. If you have a flower pot with a single plant in it, they'll find it. You don't need to have any specified size property or plot of land for them to find it. These guys are really good at finding pollination sites.
And then someone was wondering, is anything planned for the Still River Greenway?
We've been talking about it, but we haven't put any hard and fast plans together. It's a project I would like to do in conjunction with Parks and Rec and maybe the NCLC, my land trust, to see if we can get a grant to buy the plantings and then get some volunteers to go out there and have a day where we can plant them all. It's obviously not going to happen this spring. Well, because of COVID, we can't do it much anyhow. We can't get together that closely anyway. But it's something that I'd like to work on for next spring.
Another question, which I'm sure a lot of people have, is what specific tips do you have for a shady yard? Are there particular plants or anything else that people should know that would help people with shady yards have a
Yeah,
plant?
well, yeah, I have an area. I have a shady yard myself. Half of it is at least. The best thing to do. Actually, we're going to be putting on a Zoom presentation on this probably in a month or so. But if you're interested in doing it sooner, I'd go by Shakespeares Garden and talk to Caitlin Blows or any of the people who work there. They'll be able to tell you what plants do well in the shade, like your hostas and things like that. But they have a whole raft of plants they can suggest for you in different colors and different types of, in different times of the year that they bloom, etc. So I would suggest talking to Shakespeares Garden, and they will guarantee steer you in the right direction.
Okay, so you've mentioned, the person said thank you. Aside from Shakespeare's Garden, are there other places that you can recommend where people can find native plants?
There's a place in Woodbury, and I don't recall the name right now, but there is. I could look it up and let you know. But I'm sure there are other garden centers that carry these if you just go in and ask. I am not working with Hollandia, so I do not know what they have. I'm sure they do have some native flowering plants there. They've got to. So So if you go anywhere, it's just make sure that you're asking for native pollinating plants.
Is there, oh, someone said Meadowbrook in New Mexico or NM? Oh, probably New Milford. Sorry.
Again, I'm not
Um,
familiar with the folks there, so I don't know what they have.
Okay, they say Meadowbrook in New Milford, I assume, has done a lot of
Yes.
work with the CLA
Uh-huh.
on native plantings in our buffer gardens.
Okay. Great. Then folks, you can stop up there too.
And then someone wrote, if there are a number of people taking part, could you ask for plant donations? Some of us have already have established gardens and comply and can supply plants or seeds. That's great. So it sounds like they, maybe people could work together and get plantings or seeds from people with established gardens.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. In fact, that's you know, I've had other offers for people to offering seeds, and I'm saying, okay, what do we do? Because we don't have a physical place to put these things, and we don't have a storefront or anything. Everybody's a volunteer working out of their home. But I might talk to the garden club and see if they would like to be able to take this on as a repository for seedlings and seeds for redistribution for people who would like them.
And just to throw it out there, the library, of course, we can't have a lot of people inside, but maybe we could offer a space outside, some tables, if there was some sort of plant swap you wanted to organize.
That could be a good
built in
event.
it as a space. So
Yeah, that could be a good event as the weather warms up.
yeah. And then someone asked, do you have a personal favorite pollinator?
Me? No,
Yeah.
anything that pollinates is fine by me.
How about a variation on that? Are there certain ones that you you would consider, or the Pollinator Pathway organization would consider to be especially important for people to be planting? Is there something that would address a particularly endangered pollinator or anything like that?
Well, if you're talking about butterflies, then we do want them to have a place where they can lay their eggs, and that the pupa can have the right kind of plant to eat. So the butterfly bushes are really important.
Would that include milkweed as well?
Yes, and native milkweed, not the European milkweed.
And then someone wanted to note that it's important to make sure that whatever you buy is neonicotinoid free.
Neonic
Right.
free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if they're organic, native organic plants, they should be, but ask the question. And who's selling it to you may not know.
Is there any evidence that the pollinator pathway plantings have helped in the populations of pollinators in the sort of the Hudson to Housatonic region? Has anyone done studies yet to see if there's been a tangible impact yet?
Not that I know of. Something that the Pollinator Dash Pathway organization would probably be involved in, because they cover the whole region and they collect data from all the towns. But there has not been an initiative that I've seen come out from them. But it's one I think it's a good idea to run up the pipeline to see if they would be interested in doing something like that.
Do you feel there's any anecdotal evidence? Like, have you seen an increased number or anything?
Anecdotal evidence, I think the people who are doing the pollinator pathway are getting a lot more out of this than maybe the pollinators are at this point. But as these gardens and plantings mature, the pollinators will certainly benefit by it. I do know that, I put in a small garden in my property last year, or extended my garden last year. And even though there have been reports of far fewer butterflies, far fewer bees, far fewer hummingbirds around, I had quite a few. So I must be attracting something. But there have been a lot of people talking about the fact that they have not seen as many pollinators as they had in the years past.
Okay. Someone asked, are there safe pesticides? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, there are safe pesticides. There are organic pesticides. Safer soap is one of them. I do know that Shakespeare, I don't feel like plugging Shakespeare, but that's the place I always go to. I do know that they do have some organic pesticides there as well. But you can get them online. You can get them in a number of places. Just look for organic pesticides. And the thing is, you do have to apply them more often than you would a harsh chemical pesticide. You know, they don't have they don't have the residual in the soil as long. They don't stay active as long. They're biodegradable, so they break down after a while. Whereas the chemical stuff will stay a chemical for a long, long time. So that's why you have to apply more often. And of course, that gets a little bit more expensive. So you have to be willing to do it.
Sure. Is there any concern that pesticides, like you said, they'll stay in the ground for a while, that past use of them will affect current plants? You know,
Oh
if
yeah.
you've stopped using them or you bought a property that had used them, will that have an effect on the plant and then therefore an effect on the pollinator feeding off the plant?
Yeah, well, unless you bought a farm that was using pesticides for a long time, I don't think the soil from a residential property that you're going to buy is going to be tainted that badly. Hopefully not. I mean, if you're buying a house that has that perfect green lawn, then you're probably not a pollinator person anyhow. And you would want that. So that's yours to have.
Unless your plan is to change it.
Unless your plan is to change it. In that case, I guess you need to scrutinize it a little closer.
I did want to just let everyone know the library is going to host a program in April, and you'd have to look at the events calendar because I'm not sure offhand what the date is. I'm sorry, but it's on butterflies as pollinators, and there'll be specific focus on the monarch butterfly population collapse and things that we can do to help them. So just a little plug for a future program. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask Lou about the pollinator pathway in Brookfield?
No?
I did want to say we had a talk on native bees not long ago, and the woman who gave the talk is a doctor, is a PhD in with background in bees, be a PhD in bees, and she talked about how there had been a project, I think, generated by Connecticut College to plant pollinators in those corridors, the electric, the
Yeah, the power lines and
power
things. Yeah.
line corridors. And she mentioned that Eversource was actually, and they were very successful, the wildlife and pollinator corridors,
Mhm.
and that Eversource was making an effort to cut them all down lately. So I don't know if you know anything about that, but that was a little.
Yeah. And then I'm sure you've seen what they've done along, let's say, Route 84, where they've just chopped everything right down to the ground all the way back. There is actually a law that they do have to put pollinating plants in there. That was a law passed a few years back. So the DOT is now responsible for putting some pollinator plants along Route 84.
And do you know if they're going to be using native plants or just?
I have no clue. I'm not in touch with any of those folks. It's something that I'd like to get in touch with. You know, maybe as we get going here, I'll be able to dig in a little deeper.
Yeah, it would be a nice opportunity to have them be native plants.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
All right.
One last thing I just wanted to ask about quickly is about, clearing out leaves, clearing out the garden at the end of the fall. Do you have is there any benefit to leaving, the garden a mess for the winter so that pollinators
Yeah.
can?
Yes, there is. Because, these insects will lay their eggs, and those eggs will overwinter in the stem, a hollow stem of a plant or under the leaves. And so if you leave them there, then in the spring, these things will hatch, and then they'll start eating the green foliage that's there until they turn into whatever they're going to turn into. And so, yes, it's important to leave some litter behind in the gardens. I don't cut my perennials down now until now. I'll probably be doing it this weekend. And yeah, we rake our yard with leaves, but when it comes to the flower beds, I don't rake it out entirely. I leave some behind.
And is there a time when it's safe to go in and do that cleanup? It's when you want to
After
get
your
the garden
last,
ready for the
yeah,
spring.
after your last frost.
After last frost. Okay. That by then they've moved on and found
Right.
other places to be. Okay. Someone wanted to ask, are you familiar with Nomo May? And if so, is it a practice worth promoting?
I've heard of Nomo May once as an idea, and I don't know where the idea came from or if it's an official program by anybody. But I'm looking at that and saying, well, by May, if I let my lawn go for the entire month of May, I don't know what the advantage is, other than the fact that I'll have a lot of dandelions that are in bloom, and that'll provide pollinator, stuff for the pollinators because I don't put any pesticides on my lawn. So, so that could probably be that. Whatever other wildflowers might come up would be beneficial for the pollinators, and that's about the only aspect I can see by not mowing your lawn through the month of May.
Okay. Is there anything similar to that? I mean, you're saying, maybe don't cut as low. Are there any
Right.
other guidelines? Don't cut as often or,
No, no, just mow it whenever it needs mowing, but when you cut it, leave them up 3 inches long and leave the clippings there. Don't, rake up the clippings or, you and that way, this will provide, the clippings actually provide fodder for the grass to grow better, the thatch, and it also provides habitat for these insects to get in there.
someone, the person who had asked about Nomo May wrote an additional comment saying that he was asking because someone was recently advocating the idea to the Brookfield Conservation Commission.
Yeah, well, that's where I heard it from, but I didn't know if I don't know if it originated there in the Conservation Commission or it came from someplace else. That's why I responded the way I did. But yes, I was talking to somebody from the Conservation Commission and they mentioned it, and I said the same thing I just told everybody else. I don't know what the benefit is other than adding a few dandelions.
And then someone said that they think it may have originated in the UK, that it might be a movement from there.
Hmm. Oh, well,
Is there coordination between the different towns? I know you said that there's the H to H, but like, is there coordination between, Brookfield and, Bethel or
no,
something to?
only in as much as I might give a call to somebody in another town and talk to them. But no, there's no formal network other than Pollinator Pathway.org. They're the ones that sort of hold us together. And on their website, they have events from every town. If we submit an event, it'll be on their calendar, so you can go to any town and see what's going on. So that's sort of the focal point. It's up to the individual volunteers to communicate with other towns if we'd like to.
Are there any sort of demo gardens around that you could direct people to see what it might be like to have a pollinator garden on their property?
Well, there will be. Nothing's in bloom right now, but
Sure, yeah, of course. In June.
but when it does come into bloom, you know, they're really if there are pollinator gardens, they're on private property, and so I don't, I can't advertise. Go so has to take a look. But like I said, in late April and in the month of May, Shakespeare's Gardens has offered to do tours. Now I haven't put a schedule together yet, but it'll be Wednesday, Thursdays, and or Fridays throughout the 5 weeks or so when everything is there, and they could walk through, show you what the plants look like. They could answer questions. They could tell you which plants should belong where, how to best take care of them, when to plant them, and all that kind of stuff. They've been very good about that, and I was thrilled that they volunteered to do that. So if you want to see a demonstration, I would say that's probably the best place to go.
Okay, great.
Um,
Nothing like with, say, the high school or another school that's, using it.
no, there was a pollinator garden put in up at the Huckleberry School, but that's all under construction now. And when COVID hit, the kids went home and nobody took care of them, so there's no garden there anymore.
Fair enough.
And that's the problem with doing community plantings. I mean, if we get a grant, we go out and buy plants, and we put them in. That's great. Everybody has a great time that day. They feel good about themselves. But if there's nobody there to take care of the plants, they're not going to make it. So
So is
the
there
maintenance is a big part.
Is there anything, to be said for native plants having, being stronger in the area since they are native plants? I mean,
Yeah, they
is there
are.
any, is it easier to have a garden of native pollinator plants, or is it still the same amount of work as it would be to have an
No, I mean, you're going to have the same issues with diseases and bugs and not enough water or whatever, not enough fertilizer in the ground with them as with any other plant. It's just that the natives produce the pollen that matches the nutritional requirements of our local pollinators, and that's really the main difference. They're getting really, for example, if you put a hummingbird feeder outside your window and you fill it full of sugar water, with the red dye in it, these birds come around and they feed on that, and nutritionally, it's not good for them. And then they're not hungry enough to go to the real plant where they can get the good nutrition. They can't tell the difference. So, if you're going to do that, then go down to Birds Unlimited, or and pick up a bottle of the nutritionally competent food, and then put that in your feeder.
Someone did put in a comment that I wanted to share, and that is that Shakespeare's Garden, they said, Shakespeare's Garden is amazing with helping plan a pollinator garden. They helped me draw up a sketch of different plants to have flowers all year and to help different types of
Mhm.
pollinators. A little plug for Shakespeare's Garden.
There you go. The other company around is called Natural Lawn. They're out of Newtown, and they have organic lawn care services. If you wanted to contact them, I think some of the others now, like True Green and those guys, I think I've seen them start advertising organic alternatives. So we may be turning them around slowly but surely.
Is there any plant, any sort of native grass that you could use instead of, this grass you use on your lawn? Is there anything that could take any native plant that could be similar to a lawn? Someone put in clover. Someone answered for me. Something that you can use in the place of, your usual lawn grass, a native grass, or I guess something like clover. Something that could take the place of a lawn, but have a similar look, a similar aesthetic.
Other than a type of grass,
Or just anything that, if you say, lawn is kind of a dead zone for pollinators, is there something that has a similar aesthetic to a lawn, but that is friendly to pollinators?
not that I know. I mean, grasses are grasses. Now I have Zoya grass in my yard, which is planted as a plug, and this plug creates a network. It's highly invasive. I mean, every year I have to dig it out of my gardens and my walkways, but it's very, very thick, and it chokes out any competing plants. And it browns out early and it gets green late. But throughout the summer, I don't care how much of a drought we have, it's brilliant green and I don't water it. So
Okay, that's interesting for water conservation.
it's just a hardy grass. But that's the only thing I could say that would substitute and choke out some of the invasives, etc.
Someone put in clover, and then someone else wrote sedges. So I don't know if that's something.
Well, it all flowers and clover pollen is great. Honeybees use it and make great honey from it.
Um, okay. I think that's all the questions that we have here. Was there
All
anything
right.
else that you wanted people to know about or to share?
No, other than, we have a number of volunteers that have joined the movement. Many of them are master gardeners. Many of them are just people who are very much in love with gardening and the outdoors, and they've become very knowledgeable by their own reading, by their own efforts. And the more we can get people to talk about this to other people, the more folks will get turned on to the idea that, hey, this is not so hard to do and it's a good thing to do. And that's really what my bent is on the pollinator pathway. I would rather have this as a movement to educate people so that they can do the right thing for themselves. And that'll help everybody. And it's also free.
Oh, I did have one more question quickly. Is there any coordination between the Pollinator Pathway movement and the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservation?
Yes. They support what I'm doing. the land trust was, I was the president of the Brookfield Open Space Legacy for about 7 or 8 years. And in late 2019, we merged with what was then Weatnog Land Trust. Weatnog has since changed their name to the Northwest Land Conservancy, Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy. So NCLC is now their handle. But they are very supportive. They are not the sponsors of the pathway. Most land trusts are not the sponsors. Bosley was, and so that's been left to me to handle. But they are very supportive, and as this moves forward and they can get it on their radar, they are going to be becoming more and more involved with what we're doing and taking this from here up into Litchfield County, where they have most of their properties. They have over 10,000 acres.
If that land would promote native plants and pollinator
Yeah.
plants, that would be a lot of
All right. Well, we have a couple hundred acres in Brookfield that belong to them, so that's properties we're working on.
nice. Okay, well, unless someone else has a question, now's the time to type it into the chat. Oh, sorry, there is one more. That on the Facebook page for the Brookfield Pollinator Pathway, that there's a short video that includes native plants, so people might want to check that out.
Yep.
I'm sure you'll echo that sentiment.
Yeah, I post as much as I can on there. I hope everybody else, as they come across things, will post them as well. So just share the information.
Wonderful. Okay, and can people reach out to you through the Facebook page to get involved or have questions or anything? Is that a good
To
way
the
to?
Facebook page, or you could email me at Brookfield Pollinator Pathway at gmail.com.
Okay, easy enough. Okay, well, Lou, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. I wanted to let everyone know, I put it in the login information, but if anyone wants the handouts, please just let me know and I'll email them. I didn't want to include them in the login because it already goes to the spam folder most of the time, and with attachments, it would be even more problematic. So, but please, Lou provided some wonderful handouts, and I'd like to provide them to everybody
Yep.
who signed up. So,
Those handouts and many, many more at propollinator.org or at pollinator-pathway.org. You can start, they're free to download, so take advantage of it.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lou, and I hope you'll come back and do some more programming with us.
Yeah, and
This-
hopefully next time my computer will allow me to hear people. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.